So for this story, I'm going to make UA a university so all students are aged up. Also, Izuku will be the only devil fruit user. But through story plot, he might train some people in hockey, not 100% sure about this yet. But hey, we'll find out when we get there. And yeah, I'm putting him in 1B because they don't get enough love, and hey, it'll be fun writing down interactions between 1A and 1B. If you're looking for a Bakugo redemption type of story, then sorry to disappoint, but I will not be doing that. Anyways, ask any questions you guys have, cause who knows, those might help me add to the story as we go along this journey together. Izuku Midoriya. Age 18. Gender male. Before change. Before change. After change. With his glasses. With his glasses. Height. 203 centimeters. 6 feet 8 inches. Height. 203 centimeters. 6 feet 8 inches. Personality. Kind, caring, brave, intelligent, and easygoing. Like his mother, Katsudon, helping others, flying, cooking, training, building machines, and singing. Dislikes. Bullies, arrogant people, Katsuki Bakugo, awkward silence, being looked down on, people hurting those he cares about, and non-team players. Powers. Tori Tori no Mi, model, Phoenix. A mythical Zoan-type devil fruit which bestows the power to transform into a phoenix and phoenix hybrid, at will. A mythical Zoan-type devil fruit which bestows the power to transform into a phoenix and phoenix hybrid, at will. Abilities. Full/partial transformation to his phoenix form. Self-healing/healing abilities. Flames of regeneration. Flying at high speeds. Unable to take physical damage while in phoenix form. Strong talon-like feet when transformed either fully or partially. Increased physical abilities. Resistant to fire-based attacks. Hockey types. Observation hockey. Armament hockey. Conquers hockey. Mizufu, Japan was home to a lot of things. Apart from holding some of the most recognized heroes throughout all of Japan, it was also home to the #1 hero, All Might, also known as the symbol of peace throughout the world. Ever since his first debut, he had single-handedly brought Japan's crime rate down by 60%. His signature moveset consisted of American named states, and no one could forget his ever-plastered-on smile that brought warmth and happiness to the citizens of Japan. However, even though All Might had brought down organized crime down significantly, he had unknowingly started a tumor to begin growing throughout hero society. There was almost no kid that didn't want to grow up to be a hero because of him, but slowly people's ideologies of what heroes were began to change. Now it didn't matter to many if you wanted to become a hero, but instead you could only become a hero if you had a flashy, powerful quirk. And thus began the slow growth of quirk discrimination to begin to unfold. Those deemed with villainous quirks often found themselves being denied entry or outright refusal to go into businesses because of their mutant-type quirks. And those that didn't even have a quirk to begin with, even though it was a small percentage, were treated like they were a plague to be avoided. Oftentimes they would be denied work opportunities, harassed, and were oftentimes overcharged for everyday necessities. That, however, was just a small glimpse of how those with unfavorable quirks and quirkless were treated in the public. However, the statement of children being cruel could not hold any truer than how students treated each other in schools. How no one noticed or acknowledged the increased suicidal rate of students due to bullying is a question for another day, and one that our future hero is thinking about as he sits on the edge of a building overlooking his home city. Ever since he was told the news of being quirkless, Izuku Midoriya's life sank deeper than the Titanic when it ran into the iceberg. Now most would be surprised at how quickly his life became a living hell. Before he was diagnosed, he was actually quite the popular kid amongst the other students, always being able to bring others happiness by just giving them his signature smile. But when it came out that he was indeed quirkless, it was as if a switch had been flipped. Former friends began avoiding him. Then the taunting started, and this eventually led to some students and even some adults to begin to physically hurt him. None more so than his former best friend Katsuki Bakugo. "That bastard," whispered Izuku as he began to remember all the things his former friend had done to him. After all, his body was the proof of how the future #1 hero was going to be the strongest. Yet he persevered through it all, his dream of becoming a hero that could save others with a smile like his idol All Might unwavering. At least that's how it was before he actually met him just a few hours ago. As Izuku closed his eyes, he began remembering all of today's events like a motion picture being played on a screen. From being told by Bakugo to kill himself and pray for a quirk in his next life, to walking under a bridge and suddenly being engulfed in a gross slime villain. And then being saved by his idol All Might himself and getting his autograph. This had instantly brought his prior bad day to be turned into a good day in his books. However, he needed to ask his idol the question he had wanted an answer to for the longest time. That's why when All Might turned to jump away and leave, Izuku had clung into his leg hoping to get the chance to ask his question to his idol. After noticing the kid holding onto his leg, All Might stopped on top of a nearby building and slightly scolded the young man for his recluse behavior. Seeing his idol scold himself dampened his mood a little, but nothing was going to stop him from asking his question. Flashback. All Might, can I ask you a Q question? Asked Izuku with a stuttering voice. Sure, go ahead young man, but make it quick, there is still plenty of crime out there. Stop, and I must get going as soon as I can, declared All Might with his signature smile. I was wondering, can a Q quirkless P person be a H hero? Asked Izuku with nervousness clearly visible in his voice. And for the first time that Izuku could remember, he saw something most would consider impossible. All Might dropped his smile. I am sorry young man, but those without a quirk would only be a liability for true heroes in this field. It's okay to dream, but try and make them more realistic, said All Might. Oh, said Izuku as tears began to fall from his eyes. Well, make sure to take care of yourself young man, said All Might as he quickly put on his smile again and jumped away, leaving Izuku alone on top of the building. Present. After sitting on the ledge for a few hours and looking back on his life, Izuku's eyes became a dull color. No longer did they hold the once bright green shine that his mother told him made him look amazing. No longer did he hold the fake smile that he had put on to make others believe he was unaffected by how they treated him. Ha! I guess I really am a Deku, said Izuku as he was now standing over the edge of the tall building. I am sorry, Mom. Please live a happy life, said Izuku. Without a second thought, Izuku had let his body be brought down by gravity as a feeling of a heavy weight being lifted off his shoulders brought the first true smile he had smiled in years. As he closed his eyes, he waited for the pain that would be sure to follow. However, before he could meet his date with death, Izuku felt himself soaring through the air as if he was flying. Now, why would you go and try and kill yourself, kid? Came the voice of an unknown man holding Izuku with what appeared to be talons? As Izuku began to regain his senses, he took notice on the man who had saved his life. Holding him by talons and surrounded by blue flames in the shape of wings, Izuku looked up at his savior. So are you going to tell me your name or what, kid? Said the unknown man. So are you going to tell me your name or what, kid? Said the unknown man. I Izuku Midoriya sir, stuttered Izuku. Whoa, easy kid, I don't bite, no need to be so nervous, said the unknown man. Can why you put me down please, asked Izuku. Oh, yes, sorry about that, said the unknown man while giving an embarrassed smile. After landing on top of another building, both Izuku and the unknown man looked at each other, neither knowing what to say. Can I get why your name sir? Asked Izuku while looking down on the ground. Smiling, the unknown man began, Name's Milik Marco, others also call me Marco the Phoenix. Phoenix? Like the mythical bird? Is that your quirk? Asked Izuku as he surprised Marco by his enthusiasm. Shaking his head in the negative, Marco replied, Sorry to disappoint you, kid, but I do not have what you call a quirk. What I have is something from another world. And it's the reason on why I'm unable to go back to my home, said Marco with a sad smile as he looked towards the sky. What do why you mean? Asked Izuku. Well, you see, kid, I know it may sound crazy, but I am not from this world, said Marco to a stupefied Izuku. But why you grew wings and talons? How do why you have powers that's and not a quirk? Shouted a unbelieving Izuku. Well, you see, kid, I'm from a world where people can gain special powers by eating these special fruits called devil fruits, said Marco while sitting down. To then how come why you can't go be back? Asked Izuku as he sat down next to Marco. Sighing, Marco began to explain, the devil fruit I ate gave me the abilities of the ancient phoenix, which allows me to heal myself anytime I go into my phoenix form or just use my power. And the only way for me to go back to my world is to be able to pass on through this world's afterlife and be reborn back into my world, said Marco while having a glazed over look in his eyes. So, how see can you pass on then, asked Izuku hesitantly. I would need to pass on this power to someone else, but giving this power to just anyone is just dangerous, and as much as I want to return home, I need to make sure that whoever gets my powers will not only be able to use them correctly, but also have a good reason as to why they should be given my power, said Marco with a determined look in his eyes. Good our reason? Asked Izuku with a bit of hope in his eyes. Yep. I wouldn't want to just give my power to some power-hungry idiot or self-absorbed douche now, would I? Smirked Marco. But as far as I've seen, the only ones that seem kinda worthy are those spandex-wearing weirdos. I mean, really? Are they best option I have, said Marco as he hung his head down in defeat. Why do you sound you unsure about heroes, Marco-san? Asked Izuku. Narrowing his eyes, Marco continued. It's because I've seen some of those weirdos put some civilians into dangerous positions just to act like they saved them from danger seconds later. Hearing this, Izuku was left shocked. Heroes purposely putting others into danger just to appear like they were saving them was something he didn't believe was possible. You okay, kid? Asked Marco with a curious look on his face. Blinking, Izuku nodded his head, not trusting his voice at the moment. Silence overtook the two as they just sat back looking up towards the sky, taking in the scenery. After a few moments, Izuku asked a question that would change his life. And Marco, do you think I might be able to inherit YUPP power? Asked Izuku as he looked down to his lap. Taking a few seconds to think of his question, Marco finally took full notice of Izuku's physical conditions. Little to no muscle, clear signs of being antisocial, extremely timid/shy, might be prone to put himself into danger without thinking things through, and lack of any visible signs of training, were just some of the thoughts that raced inside Marco's mind until he spoke. Don't get me wrong, you seem like a good kid, but you literally just tried to end your life by jumping off a building a few minutes ago, and I don't really want my successor to end his life due to a lack of willpower and backbone, stated Marco as he looked Izuku in his eyes. Oh, I see, said Izuku in a sad, reserved tone. Why do you want my power, kid? And before you speak, take a deep breath and calm yourself. It's getting a little hard and annoying trying to understand what you're saying with that stuttering of yours, said Marco as he continued looking at Izuku. Taking a few deep breaths and calming his nerves, Izuku answered the man. I want to save others and make them feel safe. Now, Izuku expected some kind of a response, whether it be positive or negative he didn't know, but based on his experience, the latter was most likely to happen. However, Izuku never expected to be hit over the head hard enough to form a comically large bruise on top of his head. Now, it's not good to lie to me, kid. I can see it in your eyes that as much as you say you want to help others, there's something much deeper you want. What is it? Said Marco as he looked Izuku down with his serious stare. Don't dash. Before Izuku could continue, Marco had once again interrupted Izuku by pulling him his shirt until they were face to face. You can't lie to me, Izuku. People always say that a person's eyes are the gateway to their souls, and looking into yours shows me that you want more than just play hero, said Marco while Izuku tried to avert looking at his eyes. So what is it that you truly want, Izuku? Asked Marco as he released blue flames that surrounded Izuku. However, instead of feeling like he was on fire, Izuku instead felt warm and protected inside the flames, and before he could think of what to say, his mouth responded. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to have people with me that I can call family. I want friends. I want to be able to go and hang out with others, yelled Izuku before covering his mouth in an attempt to try and stop himself from continuing. However, before Izuku could try and make an excuse for his outburst, Marco let go of him, making Izuku fall on the ground. Now that's more like it. It's a good dream to have, Izuku, no reason to feel ashamed of it. So I'll make you a deal. If you can complete learning 2 types of skills that I know, then I'll give my power to you. How's that sound? Said Marco as he grinned at Izuku. Really? Said Izuku with hope practically spewing out his eyes. Yep, but like I said, you need to learn these 2 skills first. So you think you're up to the challenge? It won't be easy, and if you show any signs of quitting, then I won't give it to you, said Marco, still grinning at Izuku. Quickly standing to his feet, Izuku's face showed nothing less than pure determination. Yes, I'll do it. Nodding his head, Marco continued. Good, now you're sounding like a real man. By the way, how old are you? Asked Marco as he now realized that this guy really could just be a random kid. Scratching the back of his head, Izuku gave Marco a sheepish smile when he answered, I'm actually 18, Marco-san. But why a lot of people think I'm younger because of my height, said Izuku. Why do you ask? Oh, don't think anything bad about it, kid. I was just thinking that if you do get my devil fruit that you'll probably have a really big glow up, said Marco. What do why you mean? Asked a confused Izuku. What I mean is that the devil fruit will more than likely change your physical appearance. Remember that it has the power of a phoenix, and every time a phoenix is reborn they come back stronger than their past. So it's easy to assume that eating the devil fruit will force your body to change into something more well-suited for it, said Marco as he began to think of how Izuku might change. But no use into thinking that far ahead into the future. After all, you still need to prove yourself, smirked Marco. Alright. So what is it why you need me to learn? Asked Izuku. Right, so first thing, let go somewhere a little more open. Do you know where a place like that may be? Asked Marco while scratching the back of his head. Actually yes. There's this beach nearby that no one goes to, said Izuku. Great, lead the way then, said Marco. After a few minutes of walking and taking a train to the abandoned beach, Marco and Izuku laid their eyes on what could only be described as a dumping ground for garbage. Damn. And I thought Straw Hat made messes, said a wide-eyed Marco. Straw who? Asked Izuku as he looked at his new sensei. Shaking himself out of his stupor, Marco responded, not important at the moment. And thought I think you could have found a better spot, this I'll do for now. Walking inside the overgrown garbage pile, they eventually found an open area. Sitting on top of a broken-down car, Marco began to explain. Alright, listen up, cause I ain't going to explain again, got it? Said Marco as he received a nod from Izuku. Good. So what I'm going to teach you are two techniques that, as far as I know, everyone can learn, but only through difficult training and only from someone who already knows what to do, said Marco. Wait, everyone, even quirkless people? Asked Izuku with surprise and shock evident on his face. Like I said, as far I know, everyone can, said Marco as he shrugged his shoulders. Now stop interrupting. So like I was saying, I will be teaching you what is called Kenbunchaku hockey, also known as observation hockey. This is one of 3 different types of hockey that originated from my world, said Marco. Now observation hockey is a form of hockey that grants the user a sixth sense that allows them to sense the presence, strength, and emotions of others, as well as gain limited precognitive abilities. The stronger you train it, the easier and more effective your senses will become. However, to be fully effective, you'll need to be able to maintain concentration. Losing even a little could cause it to become unstable and make you lose a battle. But if you can train it to an intermediate level, then it'll become almost as a danger sense, letting you become aware of oncoming danger, explained Marco. Whoa. So what's the other skill that you want me to learn, Marco-san? Said Izuku as he took all this information in. The second one you need to learn is a lot harder but extremely valuable. It's called Busashoku hockey, also called armament hockey. This hockey allows the user to use their own spiritual energy to create, in essence, an armor around themselves, providing incredible offensive and defensive capabilities. Stretching his arm out, Izuku's eyes widened as Marco's arm became a solid black color. But even though armament hockey will increase your defense, it can still be overpowered if you fought someone with stronger hockey, or can be overcome as long as your opponent has superior physical strength. Significant physical force can also overcome this defense. And this hockey is extremely reliant on your stamina. The more you got, the longer it'll last, said Marco as he released the hockey from his arm, turning it back to normal. Now first I'll train you in observation hockey, since it's the easier of the two to learn, said Marco as he got off the car and looked around the piles of garbage. What do why you need me to do? Asked Izuku as he looked at Marco. Well, normally you would need to fight animals first, but we can't do that, so instead I may just skip to the second part, said Marco as he picked up a rag he found and began to make it into a blindfold. Wait. Fight animals. Why would I need to do that? Said a shocked Izuku. Observation hockey is easier to use against animals because they always show their emotions and act on instinct, unlike humans who are capable of deception, said Marco as he put the blindfold on Izuku. The most important thing to remember is that every attack carries an intent and a hint. Now standing in the center, Izuku began to internally panic. He knew that even without the blindfold, he would have trouble dodging, let alone fight back against his new sensei. Getting lost in his thoughts, he was quickly brought back to earth with a stern hit to his head. Oi! What did I tell you? If you want to use observation hockey, then you need to have concentration, said Marco. Walking around Izuku, Marco continued. Take a deep breath and clear your mind, kid. Stop thinking any unnecessary things. Just focus on your senses and then try and dodge my strikes. Taking the advice, Izuku took a few deep breaths and began to calm himself. Breath in and out. Focus, Izuku. Focus on your senses and right on K. Izuku moved his head to the left, dodging the strike. Do. Before Izuku could finish, he felt a sharp pain hit his ribs as he fell on his knees. Not bad, kid. But you can't let a little success stop you. Now get back up. In order for you to actually use observation haki, then you'll need to at least be able to dodge 100 strikes from me, said Marco as he looked at Izuku. Taking a few seconds to catch his breath, Izuku stood back up, and even though Marco couldn't see Izuku's eyes, he could tell by his body language that this kid was ready to run through hell and back. Show me your will, Izuku Midoriya. Dagoba Beach. It has been 2 weeks since Izuku met his new mentor Marco. Since meeting him, Izuku has been constantly pushing himself to try and exceed not only his mentor's expectations, but his own as well. That's why since the day they began his training, Izuku had taken it upon himself to also begin and clean up the beach, to not only help him gain some muscle, but to also try and restore the beach to its former glory. Over time, he had now been able to dodge 40 strikes before being hit. But with each and every dodge, Izuku began to feel different. Every so often he would feel his eyes give off a slight twitch that had let him dodge an attack from his mentor. When he brought it up with Marco, all he said was, "Wow! Didn't think you'd catch it this quickly." Confused, Izuku asked him to explain, and so both sat down for a quick break while Marco explained further. Alright, so like I said before, observation haki can either be learned through intense training with someone who has both knowledge and experience in the haki themselves. Or in some people's cases, they unlock their haki while in tense situations. Stopping to look over Izuku for a bit, Marco continued. And judging by those scars on your body, I can say that you have had some real tense situations. Seeing as his student flinched when he mentioned the scars made it clear to him that this kid had definitely gone through some shit. Deciding to talk about that with the kid later, Marco continued. So as far as I can see right now, whatever you have gone through has put your body in a constant state of survival, thus leaving your senses on high. And because of that, you're developing your observation haki extremely quickly. Normally, it would take someone at least a year to unlock or even begin to train in the basics. How will I know when I've obtained myo observation haki? Marco-sensei asked Izuku with a nervous yet determined look on his face. Adopting a thinking pose, Marco didn't say anything for a few seconds, leaving Izuku to internally freak out, believing that he had said something wrong. But before he could fall down the rabbit hole of self-loathing, he felt a sharp pain on his head given to him by a chop from his mentor. Easy, kid, you said nothing wrong, I was just thinking on how to explain it to you, said Marco in a stern tone. Anyway, I can't give you a full answer to your question as I have yet to master my observation haki. But a sign of a high level of mastery is being able to have foresight, or in other words, future vision. Seeing the dropped jaw of his student, Marco let out an internal chuckle. Letting his student process the new information, Marco was surprised to see the kid in front of him pull out a notebook from who knows where and began writing and mumbling at inhuman speeds. Oh, Deciding to stop this weird behavior, Marco gave Izuku another chop to the head, bringing the teen out of his mumbling while rubbing the top of his head. Alright, kid, I can see you're excited, but you need to learn how to control whatever you were just doing. Rubbing the back of his head, Izuku gave his mentor a sheepish smile. Sorry about that, Marco-sensei. It's a habit of mine that happens when I either learn something interesting or when I'm writing about quirks. Sighing, Marco just looked at his student with a small smile on his face, letting the young teen know that he wasn't really mad at him. But if I could ask, how great is this future vision? Once again, adopting a thinking pose, Marco went through everything he knew before he responded. Well, as far as I can say, a person's future vision won't let them see days or months into the future, but instead will let them see their opponent's next move, allowing them to either counterattack or dodge with little to no difficulty. Wow. So do they need to be extremely focused? Asked a surprised Izuku. It sounds harder than it actually is. After all, you can't just run rampant during a fight and expect to win. Even those with extreme power can be brought down by someone with a cooler head if they lose focus or become predictable in their actions, said Marco with a shrug. Alright, enough of a break, let's get back to it, shall we? Standing up and stretching, Marco and Izuku began the training once again, and finishing with a new record for Izuku, being able to dodge 55 strikes before being hit. Landing with a thud, Izuku gulped air as if he was drowning. It had been a little over 3 hours since he finished his training with his sensei, and he was just finishing up cleaning more pieces of trash. After laying on the ground for a few minutes, Izuku finally sat up and looked around to the bigger area he had cleaned. Smiling at his progress, he painfully brought himself up, stretching out the knots he still had, and began to make his way back home. However, just before he reached the exit for the large garbage dump, Izuku caught the glimpse of bright pink hair moving frantically through a random pile of trash. Deciding to see if they needed help, Izuku slowly made his way towards the crouched figure. It wasn't until he was just a few meters away from them that he was able to hear the crouched person talking to themselves. Okay, put this here. Move this there. Screw this here. Finally being able to hear the person's voice, Izuku stopped in his tracks as the voice sounded quite feminine. Having never had any positive experience with girls, he was left nervous on what to do next. If he asked her if she needed help, then she might take it the wrong way and call him a pervert, which was something he didn't need people calling him. After all, he already had that disgusting nickname. Yes, I finally did it. Being brought out of his thought by the sudden yelling, Izuku looked towards the person he was just wondering about approaching, and was left speechless at was what in front of him. In front of him stood a rather attractive girl, and even with all the grease and dirt on her body and clothes didn't deter the blush that appeared on his face. In front of him stood a rather attractive girl, and even with all the grease and dirt on her body and clothes didn't deter the blush that appeared on his face. Seeing that she wasn't alone, the unknown girl proceeded to look at Izuku with a curious look and began to talk to the new person in front of her. What up, you need something? Taken by the surprise question, Izuku stumbled on his response, leaving the girl to continue to stare at the boy with a confused expression. Sorry, I didn't know someone else was her, said Izuku, cursing himself for stuttering so much. It's cool, I didn't know other people came here, you know, it being a garbage pile and all, said the girl. Anyway, I've got babies to test, so if you don't mind, go away, said the girl in a blunt manner that didn't come off as rude, but more as a matter of fact. Deciding that he wasn't needed, Izuku began to turn around to walk away, and just as he was about to start leaving, the strangest thing happened. To the outside world, all that happened was that his eyes glowed a little red, but to Izuku something completely different happened. As if frozen in time watching a movie on a large screen, Izuku watched as what appeared to be him walk away from the girl, and just a few seconds later the thing the girl held in her hand exploded, shaking the large pile of metal behind her and causing a large pieces of ruble to fall towards her. Snapping out of whatever that was, Izuku turned around to see the girl's gadget begin to release sparks. Thinking fast, he rushed towards the girl just as her gadget exploded, shaking the metal pile behind her. Eyes glowing slightly red, Izuku began moving his body, dodging an old TV by moving to the left, ducking under a fridge that just barely missed hitting the top of his head, missing what appeared to be part of a broken motorcycle by leaping to the right. Over and over again, Izuku's eyes glowed, and with each glow, he moved his body to dodge anything coming his way as he moved towards the pink-haired girl. After what felt like minutes, Izuku was able to make it to the girl who had tripped trying to also dodge ruble from hitting her and became ensnared in large metal wires. Quickly removing the wires from her, he pulled the surprised girl to her feet and was about to leap away from the still falling debris. But then his eyes glowed red one more time, and embracing the girl forced her to turn around. Shocked at being suddenly held so close, the girl was about to question the boy. It wasn't until she heard a squelch and grunt that she realized that the guy she had told to leave had become impaled by a metal pole in his right shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, slightly shaking. Seeing as blood began dripping from his shoulder, the girl was unable to say anything as she was in a state of shock. Before she could even ask if he was okay or begin to worry about him, she heard another person's voice from above both of them. I come back, and what do I find? My student with a metal pole in his shoulder." Sighing to himself, the man walked towards the two of them with a "why me" look plastered on his face. Sir, is CC, can you help him?" stuttered the girl who had snapped out of her shock. Yeah, I got it, don't worry missy, he'll be okay," said the unknown man in a casual tone of voice. Seeing the man stop in front of the unknown boy left her wondering why he wasn't doing anything, until she heard him begin to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha. I knew you had something in you, kid, but damn." Confused by his words, the girl looked back over to the boy that had taken the piece of metal to his shoulder for her and grew wide-eyed by what she saw. Seeing that the shirt the boy was wearing had been burned by the explosion, her baby maid left her able to see some of the boy's upper body. And while noting that he had quit a bit of muscle on him, she saw what the man had been talking about. Around the area where the metal pole had impaled the boy was a dark purplish skin that appeared to have stopped his bleeding. Hearing the unknown man begin to chuckle she was brought out of her thoughts as she began to listen to the two talk. Holy shit, brat, not only did you actually unlock your observation hockey, but you also unlocked your armament hockey, said the man laughing. Are really sensei, asked the boy with a pained voice. Yep, now hold still. Grabbing the metal pole, the tall man pulled and in on swift motion was able to take the pole out of the boy's shoulder. Just as she was about to freak out and scream that they needed to call an ambulance, the unknown man suddenly had blue fire all over his body. Stretching out his arm, blue fire soon surrounded the boy as well, and she witnessed the hole in his shoulder begin to close. After a few more seconds, the hole was completely gone. All that was left was the purplish skin that had been around where the boy had been impaled. Thank you, sensei, said the boy with a relieved tone. No problem, brat, after all, I can't let my successor be stopped by just a metal pole, am I right? Becoming wide-eyed, the boy began to have tears fall from his eyes as he looked over to what she now knew was his mentor. Are really? He asked in a quiet voice. Giving a large smile, the tall man ruffled the kid's hair before he spoke. Of course, kid. I was already thinking on passing it on to you. But here you go, and not only reach my expectations but surpass them. I knew you'd be able to eventually unlock your hockey, but even I'm surprised you did it so quickly. Being confused and still feeling guilty for being the cause of having the boy get injured because of her, the girl made herself known. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to apologize for getting him injured. Looking over to the girl, both student and mentor took a second to digest her words, and both gave sheepish smiles as they had forgotten that she had been standing there looking and listening to the two of them. Oh, sorry, we forgot you were there, Miss Dash. Seeing this as the sign to introduce herself, the girl took a dramatic pose. I'm May Hatsum, CEO of Hatsum Industry, but you can just call me May. As she finished, she looked over the two guys to see their reactions. While the tall man had a comical sweat drop on his head, it was the other one that caught her attention. As she lay her eyes on the green-haired boy, she saw that he had stars in his eyes at her introduction and inwardly praised herself for such an amazing introduction. WHOA, so you're really a CEO of your own company? Asked the green-haired boy. Slightly faltering, May scratched the back of her head. Well, not officially yet, I still need to actually become established, she said. But nothing's going to stop me. She finished while puppying her fist in the air. Okay, Sume-san, you can just call me Marco, and this brat here is my student. Motioning for Izuku to continue, the green-haired boy took a few deep breaths. I am Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you, May-san. And don't worry about apologizing, I am just glad you're okay, said Izuku with a warm smile on his face. Seeing as introductions were done, May decided to ask them about what had just happened. So, Pineapple Head, can you tell me what that purple thing on short stakes was? Confused and slightly twitching by the nicknames she had given them both, Marco and Izuku pondered the idea if they should tell her what hockey was. Deciding to hell with it, Marco responded first. Well, you see, gum hair, the thing Izuku did is something called hockey and dash. Before Marco could continue, he was interrupted by her question. What's that? Is that his quirk? Asked May with sparkling eyes. Deciding it wasn't his decision to tell the girl, Marco gave Izuku a look that said it was his call. After a few seconds, Izuku decided that it didn't matter if she knew the truth. Sorry, May-san, but I am quirkless. After that, a silence took over the three. As Marco watched to see the reaction this girl would have toward his student, Izuku readied himself for the insults he knew were about to come. However, he was left shocked by her next words. Whoa, you saved me without a quirk, that's so cool, she said with eyes sparkling even brighter than before, and it certainly didn't help that she was now incredibly close to his face. Seeing as his student was unable to respond to such a statement, Marco decided to throw his student a bone. So what brings you here to this dump gum hair? Turning towards the tall man, May developed a thinking pose before shrugging her shoulders. Well, as you can see, there's a lot of material here for anyone to grab, so I come by every so often so I can build more babies. Babies? Both Marco and Izuku said. Seeing the confused looks on their faces, May showed a shaky smile. Sorry, I mean my inventions. Seeing a nod from the tall man, she turned her gaze toward the green-haired boy again, and was once again left surprised by the look of wonder in his eyes. Whoa, so you make inventions? Are you planning to make support items for heroes? Taken by surprise by his spot on deduction, May gave the green-haired boy a nod. That's so cool, I bet you'll be able to do so many things like specialized equipment or maybe even capturing gear or dash. As he continued to ramble, May was left shocked that he didn't find her future goals weird. After all, most people nowadays wanted to be heroes, not support inventors, and she had been told by so many peers that her goals were stupid. Yet here stood someone who wasn't making fun of her dreams, but was actively spouting ideas that she hadn't thought of. Having a warm feeling in her stomach, she was about to stop his rambling until she realized that she should be writing some of these down, and pulled out a notebook from who knows where and began doing that. Sweat dropping at his student and his new friend. If the constant back and forth the two were having was anything to go by, Marco let a small smile cross his face as he was glad that his student had started to make a friend. Remembering that he now had more training to give his student, Marco let a grin rest on his face, as he was glad he had found such potential in this world and was looking forward to see how far he could train his student. Oi! Bonking his student on the head, Marco looked at Izuku, who was now rubbing the bruise that was growing on his head. Ow, why'd you do that, sensei? Asked Izuku, unaware that he had just spoken to his sensei for the first time without stuttering. You two lovebirds can continue on your own time. As it stands right now, I've got to start your new training. Seeing the blush pop on his student's face left Marco wanting to laugh, but as he saw the small blush on the girl's face, he was left surprised. Wow, and they just meet each other. Deciding it wasn't his business, Marco laid eyes on his student again. Now that you've unlocked your armament haki, I'll be adding more to your training, said Marco as his student gave him a nod. I'm sorry, but what is this haki stuff you're talking about? Asked May as she looked over the two of them. Sighing to himself, Marco began to explain their situation and the deal they made. After a few minutes, May had an unbelieving look on her face. Look, believe it or not, I don't care. All you need to know is that I'm training the brat here, so he can reach his future goals, and so that I can leave my power to someone reliable, he said. No, I can understand that, but it's still hard to believe everything you told me. After all, you don't hear that a person came from another world completely different from their own, and they're not only passing on such amazing power, but also training someone in such amazing techniques with nothing in return, she said, shaking her head. Like I said, it doesn't matter to me if you believe me or not, said Marco while shrugging. Anyway, ready for your training, brat? He asked Izuku, who was looking at the ocean. Turning to face his mentor, Marco saw nothing but pure determination on his student's face, leaving him to smile on the inside. He truly struck gold to find such a successor. I'm ready, sensei, his student said. Good, 'cause if you thought your training was bad before, it just became a lot worse, said Marco with a grin on his face. Hey, if you don't mind, you think I can come with you guys, spoke May, reminding the mentor and student that she was still there. Oh? And why do you want to do that? Asked Marco with a raised eyebrow. Fidgeting in her spot, May took a few seconds to respond. Well, I thought it would let me come up with new babies and dash. Giving Izuku a glance, she continued. It'd be nice to have someone to talk about support gear with, if you don't mind. Giving his student a look saying it was his call, Marco waited for Izuku to respond. I don't mind at all, Emme-san, said Izuku. And I would also like to talk about support gear with you, he said while looking at the ground. It looks like we're building partners from now on, short stakes, said May with a barely noticeable blush on her cheeks. Great, now I have another brat to look after, sighed Marco, while the two young adults let out small chuckles. It has officially been 7 months since Izuku met his mentor Marco and began his training. Over the time he has spent with his sensei, Izuku had learned a lot more than just throwing punches and kicks. Through his training, Izuku was able to think faster on his feet and even surprised his mentor with being able to use his environment to his advantage when fighting. Since the day he unlocked his armament haki, Marco had taken it upon himself to train Izuku by fighting him one-on-one. Through this, he was able to teach Izuku how to harden his haki to the point where he was able to turn it into a shiny black color like his. At first, Izuku was amazed at the dark armor that coated his arm, but when he first fought with his mentor, he had been able to feel the clear difference in power in their haki. But never being one to stop and give up, he pushed himself hard to make his sensei proud. And as he looked at the blue ocean in front of him, he could only let out a smile as he remembered finally being able to match his sensei blow for blow. And even though he knew that in a real fight his mentor could still easily kick his ass, he was glad that he was able to come so far and push himself so hard as his goal of being a hero started becoming more visible. With the help of both his armament haki and his unique observation haki, he knew he could do it. Izuku's observation haki was something that even Marco had to admit was quite amazing. Izuku had not only been able to quickly use foresight, but with just a little more training he was also able to use the other functions of observation haki, although to a lesser degree than his foresight. And even though Izuku still pushed himself to improve his haki, Marco had to constantly force Izuku to relax so he wouldn't overwork himself. Over time, Izuku's friendship with Mei had also grown. She had come to watch his training since the day they meet. After each training session with his sensei, Izuku would begin his physical training of cleaning up the beach, and while he was doing that, Mei would make use of that time to have him move things around, making it easier for her to get parts she needed to make her babies a lot easier. On occasion, Izuku would also, although regrettably, become her test subject for gear she had made that most time ended up with Izuku using his foresight to fix the gear before trying it out and causing explosions. Right now we find Izuku once again laying on the ground catching his breath. Another day of his training being done, he had decided to lay down to catch his breath and take in the scene in front of him. As he looked over the now clean beach, he could only feel pride in himself for accomplishing what he had set out to do. It had taken him almost 8 months, but here he was sitting inside the once garbage-filled beach. Turning his head and taking in the view of the ocean, he began to think back on the last couple of months since he met his sensei. Izuku would be the first to admit that his sensei was a real hard ass that drove him into the ground every day. But he was thankful for that, not that he was some type of masochist or anything, but because it was something he needed. Since being diagnosed as quirkless, Izuku's mother had taken upon babying him from the world. And even though he loved his mother to death, he knew that all her attempts to protect him from the cruelty of the world had been in vain. He had never told her about what he had gone through while at his former school. Nor did he ever tell her about what the son of her best friend made him go through. He did this not because he didn't believe she wouldn't take him seriously, but because he knew that just like him, she had also suffered from being known as the woman with a quirkless son. He would forever be grateful for his mother's sacrifices and her love, but he knew that her way of handling his growth was not the best for his mental health. After all, the reason he had become so meek and became a people pleaser was not just because of how he was treated, but because that's how he was taught to handle any stressful situation. He knew it wasn't her fault. She had tried her best to raise a respectable young man, and he would never blame her for others' actions. But what he needed was the wake-up call that his sensei had beat into him. If he wanted things to change, if he wanted others to treat him better, if he wanted to show others that he wasn't the useless Deku many called him, then he needed to be the one to take the step to do just that. And if there were still people that hated him for something he could not control, then screw them, he had nothing to prove to them. All he needed was to live for himself and those he cared for. Feeling the breeze hit his face, he also began to think about his former friend. For the first few days of going back to his old school, Bakugo had left Izuku alone, and even though Izuku had to fight the urge to try and talk to his former friend, he had been able to stop himself and just decided to go on with his day. It wasn't until about a month later that Bakugo had tried to antagonize Izuku on his way home, and like usual had his goons with him, since after all he was a coward and needed the validation of others just so that he could feel superior. However, this day something happened that had left not only Izuku stumped, but the explanation his sensei had told him left both student and mentor in states of shock, amazement, and the shit-eating grin that appeared on his sensei's face made a shiver run down Izuku's back. Flashback. As Izuku walked down the empty hallways of his school, he could only stare at the paper in his hands. Rereading it for what had to be about the 10th time, he couldn't help but let a small smile grace his lips as he looked over the transfer paper in his hands that he intended to turn over and go full online for his last year of school. What most didn't know was that Izuku knew he was constantly being sabotaged by his quirkiest teachers who would purposely lower his grades as to not degrade, or show that a quirkless student had been better at anything than his peers with quirks. Many also didn't know that Izuku had already enrolled in multiple degree programs when he was younger and had been working as an accountant for a relatively small bank for a few years. He had also been able to obtain the rather difficult culinary degree from one of the Hero Lunch Rush's culinary schools. Yep, Izuku had accomplished a lot already in his short life, and he decided that finishing his high school year online wouldn't lose him anything. On the contrary, he would actually benefit as he wouldn't have to put up with the bullying anymore and be able to train more with his sensei. As Izuku was nearing the exit, he noticed 3 figures standing at the doors. While he didn't care to look at the 2 boys giving him smug smiles, he couldn't help but notice the look of disgust and anger on his former best friend's face. Sighing mentally to himself, Izuku prepared to deal with whatever Bakugo would throw at him, and if he got violent then he wouldn't hold back since he was already approved to leave the school. All he needed was his mother's signature. "Bakugo, what do you want?" said Izuku in a tired tone. Being slightly off guard by not being called by his usual nickname Bakugu just let his anger take over. Well, so you finally decided to grow a pair, huh, Deku? Ha! Don't make me laugh, a loser, like you should know that you'll never be anything more than a useless fuck, said Bakugu with a smug face. However, whatever response he was looking to get out of the green-haired boy hadn't happened, and this was just getting him madder and madder by the second. Whatever, said Izuku as he began to walk around Bakugu trying to leave and just get home. But like he predicted, the two Bakuga lackeys had put themselves in front of him, blocking his exit. Feeling a hand grasp his shoulder, Izuku turned his head and came face to face with the always angry look that was on Bakuga's face. Who the fuck said you could leave, huh, Deku? Yelled an enraged Bakugu. Raising his eyebrow slightly, Izuku responded, What? You heard me, you nerd. What? Do you think a little confidence makes you better than me, huh? Well, it doesn't. You'll never be anything other than Deku as long as you live, you hear me? Shouted Bakugu while he tightened his grip and started to release small sparks on Izuku's shoulder. As Izuku just kept listening to Bakuga's rant, an anger he had never felt before began to rise inside his stomach, and slowly, but surely all he could feel was hatred for his former friend. How dare he say that he'll never amount to anything? How dare he say that he will always be useless? How dare he say that he couldn't leave because Bakugu told him he couldn't? Soon Izuku was forced inside his mind, where flashes of repressed memories started running through his head as all he could do was watch. Memories of students purposefully destroying his notebooks and school supplies with their quirks. Memories of him being forced behind the school gym where other students would beat him for no reason. Memories of Bakugu constantly using his quirk to hurt him to the point of leaving scars all over his body. And with each and every memory that he watched and relieved, the more his anger increased. The outside Izuku's hair began to cover his eyes, while in his mind, he kept reliving all the things he had tried to ignore, all the memories he had pushed to the back of his mind, and all the hate he had bottled up. And ever so slowly a noticeable pulse began to be released from his body. At first it was a small breeze being released from him like the pulse of a heartbeat, but slowly it increased, and as Bakugu continued to yell at Izuku's face, the pulse that was being released just kept increasing. Ugh! Bakugu, said one of the lackeys trying to get his boss's attention. The two lackeys looked at each other, both feeling the increased tension in the air that was becoming more and more suffocating. But before either one could try to get their boss's attention again, the strongest pulse so far was released by Izuku, and before they knew it, both their visions began to fade, and after a few more seconds both of them blacked out and fell to the ground unconscious. Hearing two thuds, Bakugu stopped his rant and turned to look at where his two extra lackeys were previously standing. When he finally laid his eyes on the two extras, Bakugu became confused and wondered why they were suddenly on the ground unmoving. Just when he was about to say something, his body suddenly became stiff as a board. That was when he finally noticed the suffocating tension in the air. Slowly he turned his head towards the nerd he was yelling at just a few seconds ago. He saw something that made a shiver run down his spine. The look Deku had sent off nothing but warning signs inside the loud blonde's head. The look Deku had sent off nothing but warning signs inside the loud blonde's head. Even he had to admit that whatever the nerd was doing was making him begin to shake. Just that thought alone almost snapped Bakugu out of his frozen state. However, as he was about to cover his fear with anger, another pulse of strong energy came off Izuku, forcing Bakugu on his knees as he tried to stay awake as his vision began to blur. What was all he could say as his body shut down and he blacked out. When Izuku finally snapped out of his rage, he looked down and noticed that all three of the bastards that had previously tried to harass him again were laying on the ground unconscious. Deciding he didn't want to be blamed for what happened to them and wondering what just happened, he made his way out his former school and rushed to the one person he believed could have an answer for what happened. Later, when he finished explaining everything that had happened to his mentor, he expected some type of disbelief or confusion to be plastered on his sensei's face. No. Instead, his sensei had the largest grin on his face that Izuku had ever seen since meeting the older man. So sensei, can you tell me what that was? Deciding to get some answers, Izuku looked at his mentor that still held a grin on his face when he began to explain to him what had occurred. Well, brat, you know the two different hockeys that I've been training you in? Asked Marco. Seeing his student nod, he continued. Well, what I didn't mention was that there is actually a third type of hockey. Wait. There's a third type of haki someone can now dash. Oi! Wait till I'm done explaining before asking questions, will ya? Sighing to himself, Marco continued while Izuku rubbed the bump that was forming on his head. Now where was I? Oh yes, so there is a third type of haki, however this type is special. Haoshiku haki or conqueror's haki cannot be learned. No, only those who have the ambitions of being a king are born with this type of haki, said Marco as he looked at his gaping student's face. Deciding to wait for his student to digest the new information, Marco just watched as different emotions ran through his face. After a few moments, Izuku was able to compose himself enough to continue listening. Wow! So only a few can be born with this. This type of haki, asked Izuku, still shocked at learning he had the special haki that one can only be born with. Yep, said Marco, emphasizing the P. So what can someone do with this conqueror's haki? Asked the excited Izuku. Chuckling at his student's excitement, Marco developed a thinking pose while he went through everything he knew about the legendary haki. Conqueror's haki grants the user the ability to dominate the wills of others. The ability to affect someone depends on the haki user having greater strength of will than the person the haki is being used against. The greater the power gap, the more easily the victim will succumb. However, those with stronger wills can resist or even ignore the effects of someone's conqueror's haki, said Marco as he looked at his student taking notes. Smiling to himself at his student's ever so amazing note-taking skills, he continued. Conqueror's haki also cannot be strengthened through direct use like the other two forms of haki I have taught you. Rather, the user can increase their force of will by becoming physically stronger, meaning that as you get older and you use it, it'll get stronger. Seeing his student finish his notes, he waited for any questions he might have. Sensei, is one's conqueror's haki influenced by the person's emotions? Asked Izuku while scratching the back of his head. It's like I said before, brat, I don't have conqueror's haki, so I'm only going off on what I was told by my former captain. But if I had to guess, a person's strong emotions could make their conqueror's haki stronger, though I'm not too sure, said Marco while shrugging his shoulders. Wow. Your captain must have been a strong person, said Izuku with awe in his voice at just imagining his sensei's former captain and what type of person they must have been. Ha! That's an understatement, brat. After all, he was known as the strongest man in the world, said Marco with a look of happiness and pride clear on his face. But enough about the past. I'll try and help you use your conqueror's haki as much as I can, but you'll mostly be on your own as I can't really provide much help. Is that clear? Seeing the rapid nodding of his student's head, Marco could only let out a small smile. Present. As Izuku was lost in his thoughts, he hadn't noticed that his sensei had sat down beside him, also taking in the view of the now cleaned beach. You know, I wasn't sure if you'd be able to clean this beach at all, but damn, do you sure know how to be unpredictable, huh, brat? Said Marco as he snapped his student out of his prior thoughts. Giving his sensei a bright smile, Izuku gave a look of pride and happiness of his accomplishment being praised by the person he had grown to look up to the most. It was nothing, sensei. After all, if I want to be a hero, then something small like this shouldn't be more than a small hill for me to climb, said Izuku. As Marco looked at his successor with pride, his smile dropped a little bit as he knew that it was time to say goodbye. Reaching into his shirt, he pulled out a black-covered book and handed it to Izuku. Seeing the confused look on his student, he began to explain. Izuku, when I pass you my power, I will only have a minute at most before I disappear, and because of that, I won't be able to train you in how to use my power. Seeing the now sad smile on his student's face, Marco had to admit that he had grown quite close to the kid over the last few months. I see, sensei, said Izuku, looking down at the black book that he was now holding. Smacking him on the back in a playful manner, Marco decided to continue. Don't get sad on me now, brat. I may not be able to stay and witness your accomplishments, but that's not a reason for you to lose motivation. Instead, remember that even if I disappear from this world, I'll always be with you, got it? Said Marco. Thinking over the words his mentor had said, Izuku let out small tears fall from his eyes. Not tears of sadness, but instead of happiness of the truth of his sensei's words. Even if he would no longer be in this world, he would still be with him in his teachings. Wiping away the tears from his eyes, Izuku looked at his sensei with more motivation to live up to his expectations and make him proud. Thank you, sensei, I needed to hear that. So what's in this book? Asked Izuku as he opened the book and saw notes about different techniques and how to use them. He also saw a flash drive in the center of the front page. It's like I was saying before, brat, I will only have a minute at most before I disappear, so I made this notebook of all the techniques you will be able to do when you receive my powers. The flash drive has videos of me performing them, so you'll have a visual example on how the attacks and moves should look like, said Marco as he stood up. Well, looks like it's time you ready, said Marco as he turned and helped Izuku stand on his feet. Yeah, I'm ready, said Izuku. Good, now hold out your hand. Listening to his sensei's instructions, Izuku did just that. Just then Marco's hand began to emit a blue flame that began to spin faster and faster, with each second becoming more dense. Looking on in amazement, Izuku began to see something form on his palm. After his sensei's flames stopped spinning, a weird-shaped fruit was all that remained on Izuku's hand. After his sensei's flames stopped spinning, a weird-shaped fruit was all that remained on Izuku's hand. Sensei. Is this, Izuku tried to say, but was too shocked to utter any more words. Yep, that right there is the devil fruit known as the Tori no Mi model Phoenix, said Marco, who began to feel his body slowly disappearing. So, I just need to eat this and I'll gain your powers, sensei, said Izuku as he looked at his mentor's slowly disappearing body. That's right, brat, but I have to warn you that fruit right there will be the worst thing you'll ever taste, said Marco with a small grin on his face. Thank you for everything, sensei. I'll make sure to make you proud and live up. No, I'll exceed your expectations, said Izuku as he smiled at his sensei's almost transparent body. Hey, I know you will, kid. And wherever I go, I'll pray that you accomplish your dream of making your own family. Now make me proud, okay? Seeing his student give him a solid nod through tears, Marco only had one thought on his mind as he faded into nothingness. You'd better watch out, world. Izuku Midoriya is now taking his first step. And with that last thought and one final smile, Marco faded into the night's cold air. Staring at where his sensei was standing just a few moments ago, Izuku began to wipe away the tears that left his eyes. Turning to look over the ocean, he took a few breaths before turning his attention back to the strange fruit. Here goes nothing. Taking a large bite out of the fruit, Izuku thought he was prepared for the terrible taste his sensei had told him about, but the truth of how awful that fruit tasted made him want to gag and spit it out. It was nothing but his pure will alone that helped push Izuku through the god-awful taste and swallowed what he could. Running over to the ocean, he began to gulp down sea water in the hopes of getting rid of the bad taste the fruit had left in his mouth. Suddenly he stopped as he began to feel something hot on his body. Looking down, he saw that he was covered in green flames and began to panic. However, before he could attempt to put out the flames, his whole body became engulfed in a green fire that started forming a dome. Inside the dome, Izuku couldn't see anything past the green flames. The heat that was touching his body began to feel more and more unbearable, even to someone like him who had a high tolerance for pain. Closing his eyes, he waited for the pain to get worse. But just as the pain and green flames had appeared, they quickly disappeared, and he found himself feeling the cold breeze by the ocean where he was standing before. Snapping out of his shock, Izuku felt himself to see if he had received any damage from the green flames, even if he didn't feel any pain from his body. It was then that he finally noticed the change he had undergone. As he looked down, he noticed that his feet appeared a lot further away than he remembered. He also noticed that the shirt he was wearing was completely ripped and shredded. He was glad that the shorts he was wearing were still intact, just slightly tight around his waist. Moving to the ocean to look at his reflection, Izuku almost fell backwards at what he saw. He was looking at his face that looked older than before, and he finally also noticed that he was now way taller than he was before. Whoa! I look so different, said Izuku with surprise in his voice. Feeling the cold breeze hit his body, Izuku shook out of his surprised state and decided that he needed to get some new clothes. Looking down to his phone, he saw the time and decided he had just enough to go get some new clothes so he wouldn't be walking home shirtless. Turning to head to the closest store he could find, he left the beach with determination and happiness filling his whole body. Now he just had 2 months to prepare himself for UA's hero exam, and he was going to use it to keep practicing his skills and the new abilities that had been passed down to him. Nothing was going to stop him. As Izuku made his way through the local mall, he couldn't help but try and fail to fight the blush that was on his face. The reason for this was quite simple. I mean, it's pretty hard not to stare at a 6 feet 8 inches muscular man that didn't have a shirt on. And the looks that he was receiving from some of the ladies he passed definitely told him that they definitely liked what they saw. Lucky for Izuku, he was able to arrive at the store he was looking for quickly, and he was able to buy some new shirts, shoes and pants. Although as he left the store he had to fight down another blush as he was, secretly, passed the cashier's phone number. The only positive female interactions that he ever experienced was with either his mother and his friend May, and the latter was still his newest experience. So all this new attention from the female population was leaving him slightly uneasy as it was all new to him. Shaking off those thoughts, he decided to walk around for a bit before heading back home. After all, he still needed to explain his new changes to his mother. So for now, he just decided to clear his mind by walking around and taking in the night's cold air. After a while of walking, Izuku found himself at an intersection waiting for the light to turn green. As he waited, he noticed that he wasn't alone. Just a few feet ahead of him, he saw a young lady that appeared to be his age, and had a blank look on her face as she also waited for the light to change color. As he glanced at her, his eyes suddenly flashed red, and he soon found himself once again looking at his foresight from a third person's perspective. In his world, Izuku saw how the light turned green, and soon the girl he was looking at began to make her way across. However, he soon noticed a speeding car that was being tailed by officers heading towards her. He saw as the car didn't attempt to slow down, and before the girl was hit, he was snapped back into the real world. To his horror, as he came back to the regular world, he noticed that the light had turned green and the girl had begun to make her way across. Before he could get the girl's attention, he looked at the road and noticed the speeding car already heading towards their direction, picking up speed as it was quickly approaching. Deciding to act, Izuku threw his bags on the ground and launched himself towards the girl, who had stopped in fear as she noticed the speeding vehicle. As her eyes widened while she looked at the approaching car, she was unprepared for someone to slam into her, and within a split second both of them had barely missed being hit. She soon found herself rolling on the ground and ending on top of something soft as both skidded to a stop. When she regained herself, she noticed that she was being held in a tight embrace. As she looked up at the face of the person who had saved her life, she saw a rather handsome man smiling softly at her. Just in time. "Are you okay?" Hearing his question, she just gave him a slight nod. But other than that, she didn't make any attempt to move out of his grasp, as she was still shocked at what had almost happened to her. Letting out a sigh, Izuku carefully stood up, making sure to be careful as to not hurt the shocked girl. Once he was finally on his feet, he gently placed the girl on her feet, now noticing the huge height gap between the two of them. "Sorry for pushing you like that, but it was the only way I could get you out of the way from that car," he said while nervously rubbing the back of his neck. As the girl just kept looking at him with an expressionless face, he began to worry that she was still in shock. However, before he could fuss over her safety once again, he looked her directly in her eyes, and what he saw left him mesmerized. Although her face showed no expression, the same couldn't be said about her eyes. As he looked deeply into her cerulean orbs, he saw what could only be described as an ocean of emotions. Everything from fear and anxiety to happiness and gratitude. He could see it all in her eyes. And the more he looked, the more he felt that he could understand her, even if the two of them hadn't spoken to one another. On the other hand, the young lady herself was also lost in the eyes of her savior. She had never been one to express her emotions, and had long since lost hope of finding someone that would be able to see her for her. But standing right in front of her was the person she had been looking for. She could see it in his eyes that he was able to see through her emotionless face and see her. But she was also caught off guard as she looked into his eyes. For she was able to see pain and hurt clearly hidden inside of him. But those feelings were being overshadowed by his determination and hope. And the longer she looked into his eyes, the more she found herself also feeling that she could understand him without even needing to say anything. "Hey, are you two okay?" came the voice of a paramedic who had seen the two young adults barely miss being sent to the afterlife. Hearing the voice of the newcomer, both of them snapped out of the trances they found themselves in and soon were subjected to a quick checkup to make sure nothing was wrong. After they were given the go-ahead to proceed with their day, both young adults found themselves awkwardly standing next to each other, both unsure of what to do or say. "So, ugh. Hopefully they catch that person," said Izuku, awkwardly trying to spark a conversation. But as he looked at the young lady, she just held her same expressionless face as she looked at him, although somewhat awkwardly as she was straining her neck to be able to look at him in his eyes. Cough. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Izuku Midoriya, he said while stretching out his hand towards the girl. As she looked at the outstretched hand, she slowly moved her own towards his until she gave him a light shake in acknowledgement. Yui Kodai, said the girl in such an emotionless tone that it rivaled that of her emotionless face. Giving his new companion a small smile, Izuku began to gather the bags he had dropped and helped Yui pick up her items that had fallen when he had tackled her. It was nice meeting you, Kodai-san, and I hope you have a safe evening, said Izuku as he began making his way back home. But as he walked, he noticed that Yui hadn't moved from her spot, and when he turned around he saw that she was indeed standing in the same spot, just kept looking at him. Is something wrong, Kodai-san? He asked, trying to see why the cute girl hadn't moved. However, she didn't answer him, so in attempt to see what was wrong, Izuku walked back to where she was, and was soon once again standing in front of her. Bending his knees, he brought his face to her level and once again looked into the beautiful eyes that had captivated him before. After staring for a few seconds, Izuku let a smile come to his face. He soon stood back up and stood by the cute girl's side. Seeing him stand next to her, the young beauty turned her head in his direction and slightly tilted her head as if asking what he was doing. Seeing her looking at him, Izuku let out a small chuckle and responded to her unspoken question. You may not talk much, Kodai-san, but I can see it in your eyes that you wish for me to stay with you a little longer. Hearing his answer, the stoic girl widened her eyes in surprise as she couldn't believe that he was able to know what she wanted even when she hadn't said anything. However, she wasn't able to stay shocked for long as a rather loud stomach rumbling was heard. Chuckling and rubbing his head in embarrassment, Izuku had to fight back the reddening of his cheeks as it was clear where the rumbling had came from. Sorry about that, I haven't had the chance to eat anything yet. Want to grab something to eat? Questioned Izuku as he attempted to kill two birds with one stone. Was the only response she gave as both adults made their way towards an open ramen stand. When the two young adults sat themselves and ordered their food, they once again found themselves in silence as they waited. Wanting to get to know his companion a little more, Izuku took the initiative to start up another conversation. So Kodai-san, if you don't mind me asking, why are you out so late? I mean not that there's anything wrong with why you being out or anything, said Izuku as he tried not to upset the stoic-faced girl. As she just looked at him with the same expressionless face, he believed that she just wasn't going to answer him. But before he could attempt to do anything else, he heard her voice. Preparing, came her calm and neutral voice that sent a shiver down his spine by how beautiful it sounded when he paid attention. Oh? And what for? If you don't mind me asking. The U.A entrance exam, came her reply. At this, Izuku let a grin spread across his face. No way you're going to take the exam, so am I, he said. And with his response, he could see the emotion of surprise flash in the cute girl's eyes. But before they could continue with their little conversation, their orders soon came, and they both enjoyed their meals. The two young adults spent some more time conversing back and forth slightly, but for the most part, they spent it just relaxing with each other's presence. Eventually, they both finished and decided that it would be best to start heading back to their respective homes as it was getting late into the night. When Yui had attempted to pay for her meal, she was surprised that Izuku had paid for both hers and his meals, his reasoning being nothing more than he wanted to. When they began making their way towards their homes, Izuku had offered to walk her home to make her feel safer as it was already pretty late, which she accepted as it was what she wanted, as she was still a little shaken from what had happened. And after walking for a while, they eventually arrived outside of Yui's house. Well, looks like we're here. It was nice meeting you, Kodai-san. I don't know if we'll meet each other again, but in case we don't, I wish you luck on the U.A exam. However, before Izuku could start making his way towards his home, he was stopped when he felt Yui grab him by his arm. Something wrong? He asked in confusion. Do you have a phone? Came the question she asked. For a couple of seconds, Izuku stood there stumped at what she had asked him until his brain started working again and he snapped out of his stupor. Ugh. Yeah, here. Why do you ask? He said as he pulled out his phone from his pocket. And before he realized it, the cute girl he saved grabbed his phone and typed something. But before he could ask her what she was doing, she turned the phone screen over so he could see that she had added her number to his phone under her first name. Blushing at getting a cute girl's number, Izuku became a stuttering mess. After taking a few more minutes to call himself, Izuku said goodbye to his new friend and made his way back home. Truly, today was a day he would never forget. Not only did he receive the power his mentor had, but he had made a new friend. Looking up at the night sky, Izuku could only smile as he was already beginning to make his dream come true, making friends one at a time. All that was left was for him to practice his new powers with the notes his mentor had left him. He still had a little over 2 months for that, so he knew that he would be ready for the UDA exam, and nobody was going to stop him. However, before he could continue to stay lost in his thoughts, he realized that he had arrived outside the apartment complex where his mother and him lived. Making his way up the stairs, Izuku navigated the small hallway until he reached the door he had known since he was a kid, his new height forcing to have to slouch so he wouldn't hit his head on the ceiling. Taking a deep breath, Izuku steeled his nerves and knocked on the door. Coming came the voice of his mother from inside, and soon he was looking at the confused face of Inko Midoriya. "Hey Mom! Sorry I'm late," he said while rubbing the back of his head in nervousness. Izuku?" came the unsure response from his mother as she blinked in confusion. Yeah, I have a bit of explaining to do." And as if a switch had clicked, his mother quickly began to examine him all over. She was moving so fast that Izuku was getting whiplash by trying to keep his eyes on her. All the while she kept asking him questions so fast that anybody else wouldn't have been able to understand what she was saying. But since she was his mother, he knew what she was asking. "Mom, let's go inside and I'll explain what I can. Okay?" he said. Nodding at her son, Inko made her way inside, followed by her son, who was now rubbing his head as he had hit the ceiling when he walked inside. Soon both the mother and son were sitting on their couch and Izuku began his tale. He explained the reason he had been gone for long periods of time was because he had been training with his mentor to see if he would be worthy of him passing down his power to him. He had also explained how today was the day his mentor had passed his power to him, and that what he had was not in fact a quirk but something else. This new power being the reason as to his new appearance, as it had changed his body to make it more adequate to handle its power. After he was done, his mother sat in silence as she took in everything her son had told her. Soon Izuku had to rush to get his emergency buckets, as his mother began to cry tears of joy that her baby boy now had a power that could keep him safe. It honestly surprised Izuku, as he had expected that she wouldn't be happy with him, but he was happy that she was now more comfortable with his dream of becoming a hero. After spending a few more moments talking with each other, Izuku and his mother eventually settled for the night, one more comfortable than the other, as Izuku had to sleep on a futon as he was now twice the size of his bed. He eventually fell to sleep, all the while preparing himself for the training he would be doing to prepare himself for the UDA exam. Sitting in his room, Izuku was looking over the notes that his sensei had left him, and the information and instructions that he was left impressed him greatly. Deciding to look over the first videos to see what Marco had left him, Izuku placed the flash drive into his computer and started with the video titled, "Watch This First." Sweat dropping at how he knew his sensei did that on purpose, he clicked start and the video began with an up-close shot of his sensei. "Okay, recording is now starting. And there we go." Izuku was now watching his mentor standing in a clearing at the beach they trained at with garbage still visible, showing that his sensei was preparing to leave his devil fruit with him long before they had finished his training. "So you've decided to start your devil fruit training, huh, brat? Well, with the notes and recordings I'm leaving you, you're going to be effective at the very least by the time your exam rolls around. So let's get some of the basics done first. Knowing you, you'll probably want to get straight into flying around like I can. But before that, you're going to need to get a grasp of your new power. Only a fool would give you a power you've never had before and not explain it to you or train you how to use it." At this, Izuku sheepishly rubbed the back of his head, as it was in fact true that he wanted to begin flying around as soon as he could, since it looked so cool. He also had to agree with his sensei about how only a foolish person wouldn't explain how to use a power they gifted to someone else, however likely that was. First thing you need to understand is just what kind of power you're dealing with. As I've told you before, my devil fruit's name is the Tori Tori no Mi model Phoenix. This should already tell you that you're dealing with powers of that of a phoenix. So long story short, you're going to be able to use Phoenix Flames, be able to fly around in both a hybrid and full Phoenix mode, and you'll be able to heal wounds on your body and even heal others to an extent. All of these will heavily rely on your stamina, so be careful not to overexert yourself. Izuku nodded at this and was once again glad he had cleaned up the trash at Dagoba Beach, as it had helped him improve his stamina drastically. Now, even though you're going to have these powers, I would still recommend that you fight mostly with your haki. This is due to the fact that instead of burning, your phoenix flames will have immense healing properties. This means that you won't be able to damage your enemies with your fire. Even the moves that I've left for you that rely on your flames to practice are mainly for blunt force damage. The upside being that your phoenix flames will grant you enormous resilience, making you able to undergo extreme punishment without so much as feeling pain or being slowed down. To show this, Marco's body became engulfed in blue flames. As long as your flames are around you, physical attack won't affect you. If someone does try to attack you, it'll appear as if their attacks are just passing right through your body. Turning off his flames, Marco then did something that shocked Izuku. With one quick motion, his sensei in the video stabbed a sharp rock into his left hand. Izuku could easily see how the rock had penetrated his skin, and soon blood was coming out of the wound. As Izuku began to panic, the voice of his sensei was heard through the recording again, and he snapped out of his little panic attack. "Calm down, brat, I know it looks crazy, but I wouldn't be showing you this if it wasn't important." Even though his sensei had inflicted a wound on himself, he couldn't look any more calmer. This nonchalant attitude made Izuku calm down, as he knew that if his mentor wasn't worried then, that meant he had something to show him. Now, like I said before, Izuku, your flames will be able to heal your wounds, both major and minor. Stuff like this won't affect you that much, just watch. Instead of having his whole body covered in blue flames like before, his sensei this time had a small fire coming from his uninjured hand and placed it on top of the wound he gave himself. Once the flame made contact with the wound, Izuku was able to witness the wound begin to heal, and in just a couple of seconds it was gone and looked as if it had never been there. Now I did it slowly so you could see the wound be healed. This is how you can use your flames to treat others and heal wounds they have. But just by having your flames on any wounds you have will heal instantly. There is also a move I made that can help you make a temporary healing area by spreading your flames, but for now you're going to have to practice the basics before that. Apart from healing with your flames, you'll be able to form your arms into wings and feet into talons, going into what would be called a hybrid human form. And you can even go into a full phoenix mode. Both of these will have their advantages and disadvantages, so be mindful when in battle. But one good thing about both forms is that both your phoenix form and hybrid human form will also allow physical attacks phase right through you as long as you keep your flames on. And with enough practice, you'll be able to fly around in great speeds. For a moment, the Marco in the recording stopped his talking and stared off into space, lost in what Izuku could only believe was an old memory of his sensei. But soon his mentor snapped out of whatever he was thinking about and addressed the camera once again. "It's important for you to know that this devil fruit, while powerful, shines when it comes to defense and maneuverability. But you can think about that later. Right now, I'm going to have you practice drawing out your power. So to see that, go ahead and play the next video saved so you can see what I want you to do. Practice until you feel like you have a comfortable grasp on how to bring your flames out, and then move on to the next lesson. And remember, brat, just because you have more power doesn't mean you can just jump into danger without a plan and expect to come out unharmed." Before the video ended and Izuku could start the next one, his sensei left him with one final message. "And I know you don't need it, but good luck, Izuku." Hearing that brought a smile to Izuku's face. Even though his mentor may be gone from this world, he was still helping him, and Izuku would make sure not to let his mentor down. With a look of pure determination plastered on his face, Izuku set himself ready to begin his training in learning how to use and master his devil fruit powers. Dagoba Beach 4 weeks later. Standing in the beach, he cleaned up, stood a shirtless Izuku, panting, as it had to be the 100th time he would be practicing his technique. Standing at the sidelines was his friend Yui, who had decided to come and join him in physical training after she had asked him for help. "Okay. One more time. Greenbird." As Izuku outstretched his index and middle fingers, he began to make a dense, flaming swirl of phoenix feathers in front of him. He then began to remotely shape it into a large fireball that he launched straight at the ocean. As the green fireball gathered speed, its shape soon changed and formed into that of a flying bird sailing straight at the spot Izuku had launched it at. As the green fireball gathered speed, its shape soon changed and formed into that of a flying bird sailing straight at the spot Izuku had launched it at. Soon the flaming bird made contact with the water and a large amount of seawater was launched into the air. As the water came crashing back down, steam from the evaporating water became visible. With this, Izuku fell to his knees, panting heavily, but with a large smile on his face. He was able to produce was his version of his mentor's bluebird attack, his own coming out as green instead of his sensei's blue, and he could confidently say that he had mastered this move. Soon he felt something on top of his head, and when he turned to see what it was, he saw the face of his friend Yui using a towel to wipe off the sweat from his head. He gave his friend a soft smile and thanked her. Taking a few minutes to rest, he began to think on just how much the two of them had changed in such a short period of time. Ever since they met on the night when he saved her and stayed to comfort her. Both Izuku and Yui had met up plenty of times, most of which they used to help each other study for the written portion of U.A's entrance exam. Sometimes they would even go to each other's houses to study, which unfortunately brought both young adults embarrassment, as their mothers would always make fun of them for bringing their boyfriend/girlfriend over. And although Izuku was embarrassed about that, he was also quite happy to learn that his mother began to go out and spend some girl time with Yui's mother when she could. The smile she would come home would always leave him feeling happy, as he knew that she had lost most of her former acquaintances she called friends because of his quirkless status. So seeing her go out and have fun was a happy sight to behold. Izuku had also been in contact with his other friend Mei, but since her exam for U.A's support department was both coming up sooner than his and would be lasting longer, as applicants would have to make a variety of different support inventions, he had been unable to hang out with her in person and hadn't had the chance to introduce Mei to Yui. The funny thing was that Yui had also told him about her best friend who she couldn't introduce him to, as she was also training non-stop for U.A's entrance exam and didn't have enough time to hang out with her. Eventually, on one of the days the two were studying together, she had asked him to help her with some physical training, and the two would make time to come out to the now clean Dagoba beach. It was also during one of the days they had studied at Yui's home where she had seen Izuku's flames for the first time, and a change in their behavior towards one another started. Flashback. Sitting inside a rather spacious room sat Izuku and Yui, both hard at work studying as much as they could. Tonight was a rather nice breath of fresh air, as Yui's parents had stepped out and wouldn't be around, which brought relief to both young adults for different reasons. To Yui, it allowed her not to be bombarded with embarrassing remarks from her mother, while Izuku was glad as he wouldn't have to deal with Yui's father constantly threatening to harm him if he hurt his baby girl. And even though Izuku was taller and more muscular than the older man, even he couldn't withstand the aura of a protective father. Feeling a buzz coming from his pocket, Izuku took out his phone and saw that his mother had sent him a message. "Mom, hey Izu. It looks like they've closed the roads for the night due to an oncoming snowstorm. Both Mr. and Mrs. Kodai came to visit when the announcement was made and have said it's okay for you to spend the night with Yui, so make sure you two stay safe. Mim. Also, Mr. Kodai says if you do anything to his daughter, he'll castrate you." Well, fuck, was all he could say as he reread the message. Seeing her companion's unusual behavior and pale face, Yui moved to sit next to him and also read the message his mother had sent him, and could only agree with him. "I guess I'll be staying the night. Is that okay, see, 'cause if it's not I can." He began to stutter but was quickly quieted when Yui put a finger to his lips. "It's fine," came her usual stoic response. However, if you looked closely, you'd be able to see the slightest hint of pink on her face. No doubt the notion of her and Izuku spending the night together left her feeling a bit embarrassed. Giving his friend a bright smile, the two of them sat in comfortable silence. That moment, however, was ruined as a stomach rumbling was heard, and to his surprise Izuku was able to see a bit of embarrassment flash on Yui's face before it was quickly replaced with her usual stoic look. "You know, I'm a bit of a cook, would you like me to make something for us to eat?" he asked and smiled when he received a nod from his friend. "I'll help you," was all she said as both young adults made their way towards Yui's kitchen, where they gathered what they could to make some food. After some time, Izuku and Yui were able to make a delicious dinner of katsudon. Yui enjoyed the meal so much that before Izuku realized what happened, the leftovers they had made disappeared in a flash, and all that was left was a satisfied Yui who began to think of ways of being able to eat Izuku's cooking again. Soon both of them were helping each other clean up in comfortable silence, working to clean the dishes in unison to make the process faster. But unfortunately, their moment of peace was once again interrupted, not by any rumbling stomachs this time, but with the loud sound of the power in the entire house turning off, leaving the two of them sitting around in the dark. "That's not good," was all Izuku said before he released a small green flame from the palm of his hand. Looking around the now lightly lit room, Izuku quickly located Yui, who had appeared closer to him the moment he manifested his flames. Startled by not expecting her to be so close to him, Izuku almost missed what she said. "So pretty," was what he heard her say as she looked at the green flames in his hand. Regaining himself, Izuku decided to ask what they should do. "So Kodai-san, you wouldn't happen to have any backup generators sitting around, would you?" And the look of "are you serious" that he could see in her eyes told him all he needed to know. Sighing to himself, he was about to continue looking around when suddenly the air temperature dropped and both of them found themselves shivering by the sudden coldness. "Shit! Quick, we need to do something to keep warm," said Izuku as he began frantically looking around for anything they could use to stay warm. Feeling a tug on his arm, Izuku refocused his attention on Yui, who began lightly pulling him to what appeared to be a nearby closet. Following his companion, Izuku was soon led to said closet that was located in a hallway that separated the kitchen and living room. Once it was opened, it revealed a giant stack of blankets. "Will this do?" said Yui as she looked up at Izuku to hear what he thought. "It should. Now all we need is to pick a room to barricade ourselves in to stay warm." "By any chance, do you know which room is the most insulated?" came his response. "My room's the most insulated," was Yui's response, although a small tint of red was on her face, which thankfully Izuku couldn't see in the lightly dimmed hallway. Nodding to her, Izuku was about to grab as much blankets as he could and begin to make his way towards her room, when Yui put a hand on the giant stack of blankets, and before his very eyes the stack began to shrink until it was small enough to where Yui was able to put the stack of blankets in her pocket and began to make her way towards her room. She only stopped when she didn't hear Izuku following her. Wanting to see what was the holdup, she turned around, and what she saw almost made a grin spread on her face. Standing in the same spot she last saw him in was a gaping Izuku as he looked back and forth at where the pile of blankets was and back to her. "Well, what are you waiting for?" came Yui's response, although a hint of teasing was clear in her voice. Snapping out of his stupor, Izuku followed behind Yui, lighting the way with his flames as to not have either of them trip or collide with a wall, only saying how he forgot she could do that as they made their way through the house. After a few minutes, both of them had made it to her room and were soon able to completely barricade themselves with all the blankets. And although it did help them find some warmth during the snowstorm, Izuku could still see Yui slightly shaking from the freezing temperatures. He wasn't as cold as he had always had an easier time dealing with cold temperatures, and his devil fruit helped provide extra warmth to him. But seeing his friend shivering just didn't sit right with him. In an act that he would still later claim he had no idea why he did it and surprised that Yui didn't kick his ass for, Izuku made his way towards where Yui was sitting and in one quick motion brought her into embrace with her back against his chest. Letting out an uncharacteristic, but cute, eep, Yui was about to ask him what he was doing, when all of a sudden, she felt herself becoming warmer. Soon a lightly pulsing green color began to appear, and both her and Izuku were surrounded by small green flames that appeared in the shape of feathers. This absolutely surprised Yui, as she had expected his flames to feel painful. But instead his flames were different. Izuku's flames felt warm, but they also felt tamed and comforting. This left Yui feeling as if she was being embraced by a candle's flame. And ever so slowly she began to lean into Izuku, wanting to feel the warmth that he provided even more, completely ignoring how intimate the two of them were acting. Even Izuku began to lightly tighten his embrace on her, becoming lost in the warmth her body was giving off. "Thank you," came Yui's soft voice as she was enjoying Izuku's warmth. "No problem, Kodai-san," was Izuku's response that left the two to become embraced in the same comforting silence. "Hey," once again came Yui's soft voice that snapped Izuku back into the real world. "Yeah," he responded while turning his head down to see those cerulean eyes that captivated him whenever he looked at them. "Call me Yui," was all she said as she fully accepted his embrace and leaned her head against his chest. Softly smiling, Izuku only had one response: "Sure. But call me Izuku." A soft emichim was her response as she snuggled closer to him. The two of them eventually fell asleep in each other's arms with small smiles on their faces for the remainder of that cold night. Present. Buzz. I think that was your phone, Yui, panted out Izuku while he slowly began to stretch out any knots he had. Looking down at her phone, Yui saw that she received a text message from her mother asking her to go back home. Looks like that's it for me today. My mom's asking me to come home. Yui sighed out as she was hoping to spend a little more time with Izuku. Well, you better get going then, you wouldn't want to keep them waiting, right? Smiled Izuku as he was putting on the extra shirt he brought with him. Waving goodbye to her friend, Yui packed her things and quickly left the beach, heading back to her house for the day. As Izuku watched Yui leave, he decided that he had done enough for today and also made his way back to his home. All the while he was mentally preparing himself for tomorrow, as he finally felt confident enough to try to fly. Training at the now rather popular Dagoba beach, in a private area he had made, stood Izuku Midoriya. He was both nervous and excited for what he was about to try and do. Today was the day that he would practice flying for the first time. He was slightly glad that his friend Yui couldn't be there so he wouldn't embarrass himself in front of her. She was hanging out with her friend and said that they could meet up at the entrance exam since it was only a couple of days away. Shaking off his nerves, he began to rethink on all the notes his sensei had left for him. Okay, so sensei said that I can transform into a large phoenix or a human phoenix hybrid at will. So let's try out the hybrid form first since it's the one I'd seen him use. Closing his eyes, Izuku began to swirl his flames around his body. He mainly focused on trying to remember how his sensei had looked when he was in his hybrid form, and using that image he began to change his body. Over the month that he took to practice and train with his new powers, he had become rather adept to being able to use his phoenix flames to a rather high degree, all thanks to the notes and instructions his mentor had left for him. After a few seconds he became excited as he could feel his feet becoming bigger and shaper, showing that he was changing them into talons. Regaining his focus, he began to swirl his flames around his body faster. As he continued to focus, he began to feel as if his arms were expanding and growing. He could also feel the heat of his flames as they began to spread over his arms, taking the form of wings. Even though this process felt like it took a while, he had only been standing there for no more than a few minutes. Taking a deep breath, he opened his eyes, and what he saw left him feeling extremely happy and excited. Looking over his arms and legs, Izuku could see that he had been able to pull off the human phoenix hybrid mode. The only difference was that his wings were a shining green color compared to his mentor's blue flames. Taking a deep breath, Izuku looked up to the sky. Okay, I guess it's now or never. Giving his new wings a few flaps to test them out, he decided that he was ready to try and fly. Crouching down, Izuku extended both his wings into the air, and with one quick motion brought both of them down and succeeded in launching himself into the air, not noticing that he had created a small crater where he was once standing. While in the air, he looked over to the ocean's horizon and became mesmerized at what he saw. He could clearly see the color of the sun reflecting off the blue waves, which combined with his high viewpoint left him amazed at how beautiful it looked. He was so mesmerized that he didn't even notice that someone was watching him fly in the air with a surprised and shocked look on their face. Before he could continue to admire the scenery, he suddenly felt gravity taking hold of him, and Izuku began to descend from the sky at a rapid pace. Regaining himself, Izuku began to flap his arms up and down, and he soon found himself rising back up into the air. I think I'm getting the hang of this, he laughed out as he began to soar in the air. For the next few minutes, Izuku was traveling at fast speeds in the sky, and he was loving every second of it. From the wind blowing in his hair, to the rushing sounds he would make whenever he changed directions, everything about flying left Izuku feeling exhilarated. Deciding to make his way back to the beach, he suddenly realized something that he hadn't thought of. How does he stop? Panicking and trying to figure out a way to stop, Izuku decided that his best bet for now was to just crash into the ocean and swim to shore. For all the notes he read and videos he watched from his mentor, Izuku hadn't read the notes on the background information on devil fruits that Marco had left him. Thus, he was unaware of the major weakness of a devil fruit user. That being that a devil fruit user will be practically useless if they are in any type of water that is still, such as rivers, lakes, and if unlucky, the large open ocean. That is why when he crashed into the seawater, he became even more concerned as he felt all his energy leave his body and was soon struggling to stay afloat. He was in such a panicked state that he didn't even notice that he had reverted back into his regular form. The more he struggled, the more energy he wasted, and soon his vision started to dim. But before he lost consciousness, he saw what appeared to be vines heading his way and mentally thanked whoever or whatever had seen him struggling and was trying to help him. Later, as Izuku slowly began to regain consciousness, he sat up and shook off any remaining cobwebs. He soon became aware of his new surroundings. Instead of the soft sand that he expected to wake up on, he was instead laying down on a rather soft bed with a blanket covering him. This confused him at first until he realized that he was almost completely naked except for his boxers, which were still covering his privates. Relieved, he looked around and noticed that he was in a rather small room with just the bed he was sleeping on being the only furniture in the room. And in front of him was just a simple wooden door separating him from the rest of wherever he was. Deciding to get a better picture of his surroundings, Izuku closed his eyes, steadied his breath, and began to focus on his observation haki as much as he could. It only took a few seconds for the darkness of his vision to begin to change. He was soon able to see silhouettes of multiple sizes outlined by a blue color begin to appear. Almost all of them appeared to look like those of young children, with him guessing that the biggest one was the adult. Focusing more, he was able to see that the big silhouette and a couple of the smaller ones were heading his direction, most likely to check up on him. It wasn't long until he could hear footsteps at his door, and with it came multiple voices. "Hey Nichan, when will Mr. Broccoli wake up?" said a voice that he could guess came from a young girl. "I don't know, dear, but it shouldn't be too long," came the rather smooth voice of who he guessed was the adult. Soon he could hear the door knob being turned and pretended to just be waking up. Upon looking at the door, he saw a rather beautiful woman with long green hair that was made of vines. Upon looking at the door, he saw a rather beautiful woman with long green hair that was made of vines. "Oh, thank the Lord, perfect timing. Judokuin, can you please go and bring Mr. Midoriya's clothes? They should already be done drying," said the beautiful green-haired lady, while she turned toward a rather large boy, who gave her a mock salute and ran to get his clothes. Giving her a confused expression, Izuku began to wonder just how this pretty lady knew his name. However, he was soon brought out of his thoughts as he became aware of the children by her side giving him excited looks. Seeing as the young man was looking confused at the children by her side, the vine-haired beauty decided to try and explain the situation. "Please forgive them. They saw me bring you in and have been wondering about the broccoli man since they all saw you," she said while offering the green-haired man a soft smile. "Broccoli man? I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, Mississippi," he said, blinking a few times as he realized that he had never got her name. "Sorry about that, my name is Ibara Shiozaki," she said, offering him a small smile. "Right? Sorry, Shiozaki-san, but how did you know my name?" he asked her while scratching the back of his head, not noticing that his bare upper body was now visible. Blushing slightly at how toned his body was, Ibara quickly admonished herself and forced herself to calm down. Noticing that she was avoiding looking in his direction, he looked down and noticed the problem. So moving quickly, he covered himself up in the provided blanket and offered her a small sorry. Regaining herself, Ibara then began to explain how he ended up here. "Well, when I pulled you from the ocean, I brought you to an orphanage that I work that was nearby. And in the process of drying your clothes, I was able to get your information from UID, was her response. "Oh, right? My clothes. Did you?" Izuku tried to ask but looked away with a blush on his face. Seeing what he was wondering made her face go into a new shade of red, with some steam appearing on top of her head. "And no. Oh, one of the male attendants who was here at the time undressed you," sputtered out the green-haired woman as her arms were being waved around frantically. "Nichan, are you okay?" asked Dawn of the kids who was by her side. "Yeah. Why do both you and Mr. Broccoli have red faces? Are you too sick?" came the questions of another child that was with the group. To both of their reliefs, the young boy that had left just returned with Izuku's clothes now dry and nicely folded. Taking the other kids with her, Ibara left Izuku in the room to change in peace. After getting changed, Izuku stepped outside the room he was placed in and began to make his way around the rather small orphanage until he found his way into what he would have guessed was the living room. Upon entering, all the kids that had been sitting in a circle around Ibara sprang up and surrounded him as if he was some sort of new item none of them had ever seen. "Hey, Mr. Broccoli, you're finally awake," came the same young voice he had heard before. This time he was able to see that he was in fact right, and that voice belonged to a young girl with light brown hair done up in pigtails. What caught his attention about her the most was her two different colored eyes. While her left eye was a dark brown, her right eye was a shiny gold. As he looked over the group of children, he quickly made mental notes on just what type of quirks that they had, mentally noting that they all had some type of mutant type of quirk. Apart from the large boy Yugo and the little girl, he also saw a small orange-haired boy with a scorpion tail, a light blue-haired girl with wings for arms, a black-haired boy with horse legs, and a long black-haired girl with a rather nasty-looking scar on her left eye. All of them looked rather young, maybe no older than 10 years old. But before he could continue to make more mental notes, Izuku quickly found himself being climbed on, as if he was an amusement ride by some of the kids. Seeing as their guest was becoming overwhelmed by the sudden attention, Ibara called back the children. "Come on, children. Give Midoriya-san some space, you're making him uncomfortable." At her statement, all the children stepped back and gave him a bow with a quick sorry, and made their way back to sitting in a circle around Ibara. "Okay, now let's finish our reading time, and then you can be dismissed for dinner, okay?" And with that, she continued with the children's reading time as they sat around and listened to her. Izuku sat down and decided to stay and watched as how the women that saved him read to the young children from what looked like an old Bible. As he sat there, he became just as mesmerized as the children, listening to the green-haired woman's voice as it danced in the air as she read. The more she read, the more he became entranced with her voice. So entranced was he that it wasn't until the sound of growling stomachs that came from some of the children that he snapped out of whatever trance he found himself in. "I believe this is a good place to stop for now. Let's make our way to Dash." Before she could finish, a nearby phone began to ring, interrupting her. "One moment, children." With that said, she picked up the phone, and even though Izuku couldn't hear what was being said, the sour face that Ibara made was more than enough evidence that it wasn't good. "Okay. Yes, don't worry, I'll figure something out." No, it's okay, thank you for letting me know." "Okay." With a sigh, she put the phone down and with a forced smile addressed the children in the room. "Unfortunately, it appears that an accident happened in the kitchen, and we won't be able to go there to eat tonight. I'm sorry, children, but I'll think of something," she said while trying not to tear up at the sad faces of the now downcast children. Seeing as how everyone was feeling sad and deciding that he still owed her for saving his life, Izuku coughed into his hand, gathering their attentions. "Well, if you'd like, I can set up something and cook for the little ones. I'm no master chef, but I can definitely make something delicious," he said while giving all of them his 1,000,000 smile. Giving him a questioning look with a small tint of pink on her face, Ibara was about to ask him what he was talking about, but was beat to it by some of the young kids. "But how will you do that, Mr. Broccoli?" asked the blue-haired girl with wings. "Yeah, if the kitchen can't be used, then how are you going to warm anything up?" came the question of the orange-haired boy with a scorpion tail, with the rest of the children nodding with him in agreement. Chuckling at their questions, Izuku stuck his hand out, palm raised upward, and in a rather showy manner made his green flames appear. "Don't worry, kids, that's not a problem for someone like me." After getting out of their shock, the children began to jump up and down in excitement. Deciding to let them have their fun, Ibara walked Izuku to their pantry, where Izuku decided to make something simple but filling. With Ibara's help, Izuku was able to set up a makeshift kitchen outside. While he prepared something, she went on and began to cut vegetables to add to the kids' diet, and soon the two fell into a rather relaxed routine. Unbeknownst to the two of them, the kids were peeking at the two of them from around a corner. "Wow! Nichan is really friendly with Mr. Broccoli," came the voice of the long black-haired girl with a scar on her eye. "Yeah. Do you think she likes him?" came the question from the black-haired boy with horse legs. "Do you mean like or like?" asked the large boy Yugo. "If they get married, would that make them our papa and mama?" came the innocent question from the brown and golden-eyed girl. Before the children to continue to ask questions, a wonderful smell caught their attention, and soon they saw how Izuku and Ibara had started frying up some of the food they brought out. It wasn't too long of a wait. as in just a couple of minutes the food was ready and they all had a wonderful dinner eating outside and getting to know Izuku better. "So why do you kids keep calling me Mr. Broccoli?" asked Izuku as all the kids gave him confused looks. "Because your hair looks like broccoli," came the universal answer all the kids gave him that made Izuku comically face fault. Chuckling at their antics, Ibra was rather happy that an unlucky event had led the children to having a fun time. Wanting to get to know the person she helped a little more, she soon joined the kids in asking Izuku questions. "So why did you crash into the ocean, Midoriya-san? You looked like you were having a fun time flying around. So why chose to stop in such a reckless manner?" she asked, noticing that her fellow green-haired friend began to sweat bullets. Well, would you believe me if I said that was my first time flying?" he said sheepishly as she gave him an "Are you serious" look. "So, to test out if you could fly, you did it without a backup plan," she said while not once taking her eyes off of his squirming form. Well, when you put it like that." Slumping in defeat, the children around him began to laugh as their Nichan looked like a mother scolding her misbehaving child. "Wait, Mr. Broccoli, you can fly," came the excited voice of the double-colored-eyed young girl. Snapping out of his depressed mode, Izuku jumped up off the ground and walked over to an open area, and to the surprise of everyone around, he engulfed himself in his phoenix flames. This action left the onlookers slightly blinded by the sudden bright light of his green flames. After a few seconds, they were able to regain their vision, and what they saw left all the kids with stars in their eyes and Ibra with her mouth slightly open. Flying slightly above ground was Izuku Midoriya, flapping his arms up and down in his hybrid phoenix form consisting of wings made of green flames and feet now the shape of talons. "You can fly just like me," came the happy voice of the light blue-haired girl as she began to fly around Izuku with her own wings flapping up and down in an excited manner. "Look at us, a couple of birds," chuckled Izuku as he watched the little girl fly around him. As Izuku watched the young girl flying around, he was able to see just how she was able to stop herself every time she was about to hit something and decided to try out her technique. With one strong flap, Izuku launched himself into the air and began to gather speed. Then, with one quick turn, he shot himself towards the ground, much to the shock of those watching him. He began to descend faster, and right before he made contact with the ground, he used the young girl's movement, and to his surprise, and those watching him, he was able to stop himself right before hitting the ground. "Yes, it worked!" he cheered as he went back into his regular form and began to jump up and down in happiness. So lost was he in his glee that he hadn't noticed that he began to hug Ibra in happiness of his success, leaving the poor women as a blushing mess. After calming down from his previous happiness, Izuku finally noticed that he held a passed-out girl in his arms and began to frantically try to bring her back into consciousness. All the while, the small children watching them were just giggling at how the two grown-ups were behaving. Later, after cleaning up and preparing for their bedtime, all the kids later in their respective beds. Girls on the left and boys on the right. However, they were all still being a little rowdy. But Nichan whined one of the boys. "No buts, mister, it's time for bed," replied Ibra as she finished tucking in the last girl. "Nichan, can you sing us a good-night song pretty please?" asked the double-colored-eye girl while she cutely looked at Ibra. Cheers of agreements came from all the children, and soon the green-haired woman found herself stuck between a rock and a hard place. As she tried to find a way to solve her predicament, she turned towards her fellow green-haired companion, and an idea struck her. "Well, Midoriya-san said he had a special song just for you boys and girls. How does that sound?" Now was she throwing him under the bus? Sure, but hey, she wasn't a singer, and who knows, maybe he'll be able to give them something nice to sleep to. Caught off by her announcement, Izuku was unable to disagree with her as all the children stared at him with pleading eyes. It didn't take long for him to cave, and with a heavy sigh Izuku walked over to the double-colored-eyed girl and bent down slightly so they were eye to eye. "Well, little missy, since you wanted a song, what type do you want me to sing?" he asked her with a grin. Giggling at being called Missy, the young girl took a cute thinking pose for a second before beckoning Izuku to lean close. After whispering her request to him, Izuku gave her a large smile and nodded. "I think I have the perfect one, just let me see if I can get what I need." With that said, Izuku got up and walked to his fellow adult and asked Ibra if they had any instruments that he could use. To his relief, the orphanage actually had a small music closet that had just what he needed. So after getting directions, Izuku left the room for just a few minutes and returned with a small ukulele. Grabbing a chair, Izuku positioned himself in a spot where all the young kids would be able to hear him sing and began to tune the strings on the old ukulele. "What are you going to sing, Mr. Broccoli?" asked the young blue-haired girl with wings. "Well, young ones, in life you'll often find yourselves being challenged, and sometimes you're going to feel like giving up." At this, Izuku could see that some of the kids became sad and continued with his explanation. "But as long as you have love in your heart, you can overcome almost anything that comes at you." This song is a little story about how someone's love was able to give them hope for their dream to come true. With one final check of the strings, Izuku took a deep breath and began. Ukulele playing. Izuku. A long time ago there was a volcano, living all alone in the middle of the sea. He sat high above his bay watching all the couples play, and wishing that he had someone too. At this, all the listeners became excited to hear where this tale and song was going to go. And from his lava came this song of hope that he sang out loud every day for years and years. "I have a dream I hope will come true. That you're here with me and I am here with you. I wish that the earth, sea, and the sky up above will send me someone to lava." Some of the children giggled at how Izuku was playing on the word love, but was using lava instead for the volcano. Even Ibra was lightly chuckling as well. Ukulele continues. Izuku. Years of singing all alone turned his lava into stone, until he was on the brink of extinction. Here some of the children clutched their blankets in fear that something bad was going to happen. But little did he know that living in the sea below, another volcano was listening to his song. And just like that, everyone listening soon became interested in just who this unknown person was. Every day she heard his tune, her lava grew and grew, because she believed his song was meant for her. Now she was so ready to meet him above the sea, as he sang his song of hope for the last time. At this, the kids and Ibra became sad, thinking that the volcano wasn't going to be able to meet the other volcano and live happily. "I have a dream I hope it will come true. That you're here with me and I am here with you. I wish that the earth, sea, and the sky up above will send me someone to lava." Ukulele stops. At his sudden silence of singing, the children were about to ask him to continue to play, until they heard him take a deep breath and he soon continued. Ukulele continues. Izuku. Rising from the sea below stood a lovely volcano, looking all around, but she could not see him. He tried to sing to let her know that she was not there alone. But with no lava, his song was all gone. He filled the sea with his tears and watched his dreams disappear. At this, some of the kids had tears in their eyes, believing that the volcano wasn't going to be able to meet his love. But before any of them could start crying, they continued to listen to him sing, as she remembered what his song meant to her. At this, Izuku looked at Ibra and with his head motioned for her to continue the song. And although hesitant that she wouldn't be a good singer, the reassuring smile that he gave her washed all doubt that she had, and taking a deep sigh, she began to sing. "Ibra. I have a dream I hope will come true. That you're here with me and I am here with you. I wish that the earth, sea, and the sky up above will send me someone to lava." Hearing their caretaker and Nichan sing brought the young children out of their sad moods, and soon they were all smiling at how beautiful her voice sounded to their ears. Ukulele stops. Looking over at his companion, Izuku gave her his million-watt smile that left a noticeable pink blush appear on her face before turning back to the children, who were noticeably sleepier. Ukulele continues. Izuku. Oh, they were so happy to finally meet above the sea. All together now their lava grew and grew. No longer are they all alone with Aloha as their new home. It was at this point that all the children's eyes began to close, as the happy ending was allowing them to fall asleep. And when you go and visit them, this is what they sing. Giving each other understanding looks, both Izuku and Ibara continued the song. Izuku/Ibara. I have a dream I hope will come true. Ibara. That you will grow old with me. Although slightly shocked by her taking the lead, he just rolled with it and continued with his part. Izuku. and I will grow old with you. Izuku/Ibara. We thank the earth, sea, and the sky we thank too. I lava you. I lava you. I lava you. As Izuku stopped playing, all that could be heard were the soft sounds of the children breathing as they had fallen asleep. Leaving the room quietly, Izuku and Ibara made their way outside, giving one last peek into the room and both smiling at the smiles on the kids' faces. Thank you for doing that for them, Midoriya-san, said Ibara as she gave him a slight bow of appreciation. It okay. Although I was a little surprised being put on the spot like that, but I'm just glad that they enjoyed it, he said while he gave Ibara a large smile. Indeed, although I must say you have a wonderful singing voice, she said, complimenting her green-haired companion. Oh, really? Well, thank you, you also had a really pretty voice yourself, he said while nervously scratching the back of his head. Oh, thank you very much, was her reply as she turned away so that he wouldn't see her blush. Now that the two were alone, Izuku decided that now was the best time to ask some questions he had, and he hoped that he wasn't going to strike any nerves with his green-haired companion. If you don't mind me asking, Shiozaki-san, do you know how they ended up here? Seeing the look on her face when he asked made him realize that he indeed struck something. But before he could change the subject, Ibara closed her eyes and let out a deep sigh. Well, as you could see, all of the children had a mutant quirk, and as she looked at the ground, fighting tears that tried to escape, Izuku was able to put the info together. And what he realized made him grit his teeth in anger. They were abandoned by their parents. The slight nod that she gave him just made the anger he felt skyrocket, and he unconsciously began to release pulses of his conqueror's haki. Taking a few deeps, Izuku looked up at the night sky, wondering just how heartless people could be, even to their own children. Seeing as how his companion's mood had fallen, Izuku decided to change the conversation. Hey, do you have a dream, Shiozaki-san, or a goal you want to achieve? He said in an attempt to calm himself. Looking at the green-haired man, Ibara contemplated whether or not to tell him her goal, as she had always been ridiculed for her beliefs. However, she found herself unable to see Izuku as the type of person who would make fun of her. The way he acted with the children and the positive attitude he held just made it impossible for her to see him as someone that would put others down. So with a sigh, she decided that she would take a chance. My dream is to spread the good word of the Lord to as many people as I can. It was said in the Bible that he helped those less fortunate than him, and I want to be able to follow in his teachings. It's because of that that I want to be a hero so that I can reach as many people as possible while being able to save those that have lost hope, she said as she gazed up at the starry night, too scared to look at Izuku in fear of him ridiculing her dream. Hearing her dream, Izuku could only smile. She was just like him, wanting to be able to help those in need. He wasn't bothered by her religion at all. In fact, he was once again inspired in finding someone else that had such determined goals to do good, and he would never judge others for what they believed in. That's an amazing dream to strive for, Shiozaki-san. Not a lot of people are able or willing to put their beliefs into practice. I can already see that you'll reach it in no time, he said with nothing but happiness in his voice. This caught Ibara off guard, as she still had some part of her that expected him to be like others and ridicule her dream. Him not doing that just solidified her belief that he was an honest and kind man, something that even she as a follower of God found hard to find in people nowadays. Unbeknownst to his companion's thoughts, Izuku was thinking back on the conversation of his dream that he had with Marco all those months ago. Sure, he always wanted to be a hero to help those that needed help, as he knew how that felt like to be the victim. He was always looked down on for not having a quirk and treated less than dirt. But he was somehow comfortable enough to admit that deep down his dream of being a hero was overshadowed by him wanting to have people around him that he could truly call friends and family. He had always believed that if he was born with a quirk, then maybe he wouldn't have had such a negative experience growing up. Maybe his old friend might have stuck with him, and maybe he could stick to his original dream. But here were children that had the thing that others put him down for not having. But even they were being treated as trash, left abandoned by the very people that were meant to care and protect them as their own. If those that didn't have a quirk or those that had undesirable quirks were treated so badly, then what was he fighting for? Was he fighting to protect the same people that would easily turn their backs on others because of their quirks? Was he trying to change their attitude towards those that were different? He knew from experience that some people just couldn't or wouldn't change no matter how much you tried. So what could he do? Snapping out of her shock, Ibra looked over at the green-haired man sitting next to her. She could easily see the turmoil on his face, and believing that it had to do with the children and the orphanage, she decided to bring the conversation back on that to help him. You know, I pray every night that those children are able to find a place to call home, then maybe one day they won't be shunned for something they can't control, said Ibra as she turned her hurt head back to the night sky. A home, huh? Letting a smile grace his face, Izuku looked back at his female companion. So, what is your dream, Midoriya-san? She asked him as she noticed he was now looking at her and wanting to hear his dream. Staring at her for a couple of seconds, not knowing what to say, Izuku decided that he wouldn't think and just let his heart speak. You know, for the longest time I always wanted to be a hero, being able to save everyone with a smile on my face. A sad smile was soon placed on his face as he was talking, but that went unnoticed by Ibra as her gaze was stuck on his eyes. Others told me that my dreams were stupid and I should give up, because I could never become a hero that could be popular, he said, looking directly into her dark green eyes. As she looked him in his eyes, she could see a multitude of things, hate and loneliness clearly being visible, but were being overshadowed by the bright fire that she could see. So lost was she that she had almost missed what he said next. To me, being a hero was never about being popular. To me, being a hero always meant putting others before yourself and helping others. And because of that, I was thrown into a world of hurt. Hurt by the same people that I wanted to help, he said as his eyes slightly lowered. Memories of students he protected from Bakugo and his lackeys flashed in his mind. After he took the beatings from Bakugo and other bullies, he would always be heartbroken, as the next time he saw the students he protected would join in bullying him when they had discovered he was quirkless. It wasn't until I found someone that believed in me that I finally began to understand that sometimes it's okay to be selfish and want something for yourself. He soon returned his gaze on her and stood up from the spot that he was sitting on. He soon walked close to her and gave her a heart-warming smile. And what I selfishly want is to build a place where it won't matter who you are or what quirk you're born with. I want to build a place where everyone can see each other as family. He then held his hand out to the vine-haired woman and a determined look. I'll build a home for those kids and others who are thrown away. I'll build a place that they can call home. A place where they can always smile and be full of hope. Hearing the determination in his voice made her believe that maybe, just maybe, he was what her prayers were asking for. With that thought going through her mind, she made her decision. Well, I can't let you do all the heavy lifting now, can I? She said as she accepted his hand and lifted herself up. As the two of them looked at each other, they each gave one another smiles of confirmation. As one of God's servants, I promise that I'll help you build a home for those that this world has discarded, and help them find hope where they have lost it, she said as her voice began to become more and more empowered with every word. So, Izuku, she said as both turned to look at the stars in the sky that seemed to be shining brighter than they had ever seen them before. Let's make them a home that will leave them where their smiles will never waver, she said as she closed her eyes and took in the night's cold breeze. I look forward to working alongside you, Ibra, said Izuku as he continued staring at the night sky. With that said, the two remained there enjoying the silence until the both of them had to leave to their respective homes, now with a clear goal set in their minds. Standing at the entrance of the apartment his mother and him lived at, Izuku Midoriya was putting on his shoes ready for today's upcoming challenge. Today was the day that U.A was holding their entrance exams for both the general course classes and of course the wildly sought-after hero course classes. Today's the day. Looking down, he clenched his hand. He was determined to do his absolute best, not only to make his mentor proud, but to also show the hard work of his training. As he was about to leave, he noticed the silhouette of his mother appear. Turning around, he was able to see that his mom was standing in the living room watching him with a smile on her face. Hey Mom, what's up? He asked while tilting his head to the side. Oh, nothing. I just wanted to wish you luck on your exams today. And I wanted to say how proud of you I am, she said, but was soon having a little trouble as tears began to swell up in her eyes. Smiling at his mom, Izuku walked over and embraced her, making sure to put all the love he could into that hug. Thanks, Mom. After a few minutes of mother and son